This is Chapter by Chapter Classics, the short-form classic literature podcast, where each episode walks you through a few chapters of a great book. Previously in Dracula, Jonathan Harker traveled to Castle Dracula, realized his host was a vampire, and discovered that the Count was preparing to leave Transylvania for England. In this episode, we're covering chapters 5 through 8, where the story shifts to Mina and Lucy, the seaside town of Whitby, and the terrifying arrival of the ship Demeter.
I want you to imagine, just for a second, trying to piece together this massive life or death mystery. But nobody has handed you a police report. You don't have, like, a detective's corkboard with red string connecting all the suspects.
Yeah, that would be way too easy.
Right, exactly. All you have sitting in front of you is, well, this messy stack of your friend's private diaries, maybe a few unopened letters, some audio recordings, and a couple of random newspaper clippings.
And you're basically forced to read through all this everyday mundane stuff, you know, like who has a crush on who, or what the weather is doing in some coastal town.
Yeah, just totally normal, boring things. But then you slowly realize that a monster is hunting these exact people down one by one.
It really forces you into a position of total helplessness as a reader. I mean, you're holding these intimate thoughts, fully aware of the creaking danger.
Mm.
But the people writing the words are completely oblivious to the shadow falling over them.
That is the exact psychological trap we were jumping into today. We're doing a deep dive into chapters 5 through 8 of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
And our mission today is to, like, pull apart this really jarring shift in the narrative.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because we're leaving behind, you know, Jonathan Harker's isolated nightmare in that Gothic Transylvanian castle.
Right.
And we're stepping into the seemingly safe, modern, everyday world of England. But as we comb through these sources, it becomes pretty clear that, well, this domestic safety is a total illusion.
Stoker is playing a very deliberate game with the audience here. He pulls you out of the dark woods and just drops you back into civilized society.
Which makes you want to breathe a sigh of relief, right? Like, we're safe now.
Exactly. The immediate reaction is to feel like the threat of the vampire belongs in the ancient mountains of Eastern Europe, not in the bustling, industrialized heart of London.
Right. It feels miles away.
But he does this specifically to demonstrate that the horror is no longer confined. The threat is becoming intimately woven into the bedrooms and the minds of our main characters.
So reading these specific chapters, I actually found myself a little thrown off. We go from Harker clinging to the walls of a castle surrounded by wolves, straight into a series of letters between Mina Murray and her wealthy best friend, Lucy Westenra.
And the letters are just aggressively normal.
Yes. Like, Mina is practicing shorthand and learning to type so she can help Jonathan with his legal work. And Lucy is just talking about high society gossip.
It almost reads like you're snooping through a Victorian group chat.
That is exactly what it feels like. I was honestly wondering why Stoker slams the brakes on the horror to make us read about typewriters and wedding dreams.
Well, if you look closely at that shift, it's not slamming the brakes at all. It's actually laying the groundwork for the tragedy.
Wait, how so?
Because we aren't getting a traditional omniscient narrator telling us a scary story. We're getting an epistolary format. So a story told entirely through these fragmented, in-universe documents.
Right, the letters and the diaries.
Exactly. Stoker forces us to read about their typing practice and their gossip because he needs to ground the supernatural in absolute, undeniable realism.
I mean, I suppose if a book just announced, hey, a vampire's attacking London, it might feel a little cheap.
Yeah, it would completely fall flat. But here we actually have to live with these women first. Stoker is showing us a deep, loving friendship.
We read their private jokes and their insecurities.
Right, and their shared dreams of building what Mina calls castles in the air. So by the time the monster actually arrives on their doorstep, the tragedy feels intensely personal.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. We aren't just watching a generic victim in a horror movie.
No, not at all. We are watching Lucy, this vibrant girl who just wanted to be loved, and Mina, who is this practical, incredibly devoted partner.
And, you know, the letters also introduce us to the people who are going to be caught in the crossfire. Because Lucy isn't just gossiping.
Right, she's writing about a very specific day, May 24th.
Yeah, the day she receives 3 separate marriage proposals in a matter of hours. It literally feels like a Victorian episode of The Bachelorette.
It really does. You've got Dr. John Seward, who is this brilliant director of a lunatic asylum.
And then there's Quincey Morris, this wealthy American from Texas who, like, speaks in all these wild frontier idioms.
And finally, Arthur Holmwood, the nobleman that she actually loves and ends up accepting.
But reading this, I felt a bit of a disconnect. Like, why dedicate so much time to this romantic subplot with these three suitors when there's literally a vampire sailing toward them in a box of dirt?
Because Stoker is building a moral baseline. Think about what these three men represent.
Okay, so Seward is modern science and intellect.
Yes, and Quincey represents frontier bravery, action, the New World, while Arthur represents British nobility, wealth, and deep devotion.
So Stoker is basically assembling the absolute pinnacle of 19th century Western civilization. It's almost like he's setting up the pieces on a chessboard.
That is a great way to look at it. And notice their reaction to being rejected. They don't turn bitter or vengeful.
No, they really don't.
They immediately pledge to be Lucy's lifelong faithful friends. They put their egos aside for her well-being.
Which is a huge contrast to Dracula.
A complete, stark opposition. Dracula represents this ancient, irrational, completely selfish lust that consumes others just for its own survival.
Wow. So Stoker is basically asking this fundamental question: can modern, rational, unified men defeat a solitary, ancient evil?
Exactly. But it gets complicated when you look at the individuals.
Right, because if these men represent the absolute peak of rational society, I'm kind of stuck on Dr. Seward.
The asylum director.
Yeah, because right after this noble romantic rejection, the sources pivot us into his asylum. And I found myself really put off by him.
He's definitely an interesting character.
He's supposed to be this moral hero, but we listen to his phonograph diaries, which, by the way, was cutting-edge technology at the time, and we hear him talking about his patient, Renfield.
And Renfield is a very disturbing case.
To say the least. He is catching flies, feeding the flies to spiders, feeding the spiders to birds, and then begging for a cat to eat the birds.
He's operating on this bizarre, cumulative scale of death. He famously shouts, "The blood is the life."
And Seward just sits there taking notes. He actually considers letting the experiment play out just to see how the brain works. I mean, how are we supposed to root for a scientist who coldly watches a man eat live animals?
Well, you're viewing him through a very modern ethical lens. In the Victorian era, that kind of scientific detachment was often idealized.
Wait, really? As an ideal?
Yeah, as the height of intellectual rigor. Seward's coldness isn't portrayed as malice. It's a symptom of an era obsessed with categorizing and understanding everything through strict observation.
Okay, I guess that makes sense in its historical context.
Seward even invents a new classification for Renfield, calling him a zoophagous or life-eating maniac.
Zoophagous. That is such a creepy word.
It is. But the genius of this section isn't just about Victorian psychology. It's about what Renfield represents to the broader narrative.
I was trying to put my finger on that. Because Renfield is hoarding life.
Yeah.
He's acting almost like, well, like he's doing a miniature version of what Dracula does, just with bugs instead of people.
He is a biological mirror. He strips all the Gothic romance and mystery away from vampirism and shows us the brutal mechanics of it.
Oh, wow.
Dracula doesn't just drink blood because he has a physical thirst. He is absorbing the literal life force of others to prolong his own existence. He is a parasite.
So by showing us Renfield's twisted food chain, Stoker explains the why of the monster before the monster even steps on stage.
Precisely. We see the horrific logic of the vampire through the lens of a psychiatric patient.
Okay, so we have this isolated madness brewing in London, but Stoker doesn't let us stay there. The documents suddenly shift us to the northern coast.
To the town of Whitby, where Mina and Lucy are taking a vacation.
And the atmosphere completely changes. It goes from clinical and psychological to overwhelmingly oppressive, like the drop in barometric pressure right before a hurricane.
Whitby is where the collision between the ancient world and the modern world actually happens.
Mina writes in her journal about the beautiful abbey ruins and the local folklore. But Stoker quickly weaponizes that environment.
It's a masterclass in building tension.
It really is. The sources describe this sudden, terrifying storm rolling in. And it's not just bad weather. During the storm, a Russian ship called the Demeter crashes onto the beach.
And it's a total locked room mystery on the sea.
Yes. The ship is from Varna, which is the exact port where Dracula shipped his boxes of earth, and the entire crew is missing, just vanished one by one during the voyage.
The only thing they find is the dead captain, tied to the wheel, holding a crucifix.
And the second the ship hits the sand, this enormous, fierce, dog-like figure leaps for the deck and disappears into the English countryside.
Which shows us that the vampire isn't just some guy in a cape here. He feels like an environmental disaster.
Exactly. It's not a villainous monologue. It's an infection of the environment itself.
The transition you're pointing out is critical. Stoker uses the natural world to signal an unnatural presence. The massive storm, the eerie fog, the howling dogs in the town.
Nature itself is recoiling.
Right, recoiling from what is in the belly of that ship. But there is also a deeper cultural anxiety at play here.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. The British Empire was defined by its naval supremacy. They were the ones who sailed to foreign lands to conquer and colonize.
Oh, I see. So having a foreign ship crash onto their shores, bringing this plague-like entity that wipes out a crew, it's a total inversion.
Exactly. It taps into the Victorian fear of reverse colonization. The anxiety that the foreign ancient world could invade the heart of the modern empire, completely undetected by the Coast Guard or the authorities.
That is genuinely terrifying. And while all this grand environmental chaos is happening, there is a much quieter, far more terrifying invasion happening inside their vacation home.
Right, with Lucy.
Yeah, because right as the ship arrives, Lucy's old childhood habit of sleepwalking returns with a vengeance.
Which is the most chilling symptom of Dracula's proximity. He doesn't need to knock on the front door. He is eroding her psychic defenses before he even touches her physical body.
And this brings us to the agonizing night of August 8th. The danger moves from the weather and the weird ship logs right to the throats of our main characters.
It gets very visceral here.
It really does. Mina wakes up in the middle of the night and realizes Lucy's bed is empty. The door is unlocked.
So Mina throws on a shawl and runs out into the dark, winding streets of the town, looking absolutely everywhere.
Right. And finally, she looks up at the East Cliff churchyard. And in the moonlight, she spots Lucy's white nightdress. But she also spots a long and black figure bending over her.
It is a profound moment of violation.
Mina yells out and the figure raises its head. She gets a brief glimpse of a white face and red, gleaming eyes. But by the time Mina sprints up the hundreds of stairs to reach the cliff, the figure is completely gone.
And Lucy is left alone, half reclining, fast asleep, but pulling these long, heavy, shuddering gasps of air.
And this is the moment in the journals that completely baffled me, because of what Mina does next.
Ah, yes, you're referring to the shawl.
Yes. So Mina wants to keep Lucy warm from the night air, so she wraps her shawl around Lucy and pins it at her throat with a large safety pin. But her hands are shaking, and she accidentally pricks Lucy's skin.
And then later,
when they are safely back in their room, Mina notices 2 tiny red pinpricks on Lucy's throat, and she blames herself.
She literally thinks, oh, I must have pinched up a piece of loose skin with that clumsy safety pin.
And Lucy, who is now starting to physically fade and weaken, just laughs it off. Like, how can they be this oblivious? She just saw a monster with red eyes standing right over her friend.
It is incredibly frustrating to read, but you have to consider the profound psychological denial at work here.
I guess so. It's just hard to watch.
Mina's brain simply cannot process that a supernatural creature just drank her friend's blood. That defies every law of the modern rational world she lives in.
So her brain desperately latches onto the safety pin.
Exactly. It is a rational excuse to explain an impossible truth.
It's human nature to look for the mundane explanation. I mean, if you hear a bump in the night, you assume it's the house settling, not a ghost.
Right. And that psychological denial is compounded by Lucy's physical vulnerability. You mentioned her sleepwalking.
Yeah.
It makes her the perfect tragic victim. She is completely unaware, unable to consent, and unable to flee. She is stripped of all agency.
Because sleep makes you a passive recipient of your environment.
Exactly. And in this case, her environment has been infected by a predator.
The tragic irony is just so heavy. Mina thinks she is saving Lucy from catching a chill. She is deeply worried about her friend's reputation if people find out she was wandering around in her nightgown.
She is so focused on Victorian social norms and basic weather that she is completely unaware Lucy has just suffered her first lethal drain of life.
It's exactly the parasitic consumption Renfield warned us about.
Mm-hmm.
The spider eating the fly happening right in front of Mina, hidden behind a safety pin.
Which highlights the brutal, dramatic irony of the epistolary format we discussed at the beginning. We, the audience, have the overarching view.
Right. We read Jonathan Harker's journal from Transylvania.
We know about the red eyes, the sharp teeth, the blood drinking. We know exactly what the 2 marks on the neck mean.
But Mina hasn't read Jonathan's journal.
No, she is operating in the dark, armed only with her own limited perspective. We are watching them misinterpret the clues because they simply do not have the context to understand the evil that has entered their world.
It makes you want to reach through the pages and shake them. We've watched this massive, terrifying shift in the narrative.
The monster has successfully migrated from the isolation of Transylvania to the bustling world of England.
He has weaponized the environment in Whitby. He is preying on the most innocent character in the story.
All while her best friend watches, misinterpreting the symptoms of a literal vampire attack as a scratch from a safety pin.
Because Dracula weaponizes their modern disbelief against them. Their reliance on logic, on safety pins, and barometric pressure is the ultimate camouflage.
It allows an ancient evil to hide in plain sight amidst a modern society.
I want you to really sit with the horror of that invisible threat. Think about how terrifying it is when someone you love begins to fade away from an illness you can't see, that you don't understand, and that you have absolutely no idea how to cure.
It's devastating.
That feeling of helpless dread as the color drains from their cheeks day by day, and you're just sitting there, offering them a blanket or a cup of tea, totally powerless to stop what is consuming them.
It is a very real, very human fear of losing someone just dressed up in a Gothic monster story.
It strips away the comfort of the modern home. The sanctuary of the bedroom is invaded by something that science and logic cannot currently explain.
Which leaves us with one final lingering thought to mull over as we close out these chapters.
Yeah, we talked about how this diary format traps us in the isolated perspectives of these characters. Mina thinks the marks on the neck are just a safety pin.
Dr. Seward thinks Renfield eating live animals is just a unique psychological anomaly.
The Coast Guard thinks the Demeter crashing was just a tragic storm. But you and I know that every single one of these bizarre, isolated events is connected to the same source.
So what happens when these characters' separate, scattered journals and letters finally intersect?
Exactly. When the brilliant doctor, the wealthy nobleman, the brave frontiersman, and the devoted best friend finally sit down in the same room and compare their notes, what other horrors are they going to realize have been hiding right under their noses the entire time?
It makes you wonder what terrifying mystery you might piece together if you could suddenly read the scattered diaries of everyone in your own life.
That is a profoundly unsettling thought to leave on. The idea that the full picture of a disaster is already written down, just waiting to be compiled. We'll be back to piece together the next chapter of the mystery soon.
That's chapters 5 through 8, Mina and Lucy's friendship, Lucy's suitors, Renfield's strange behavior, the Demeter's ghostly arrival, and the first signs that Dracula is now active in England. In the next episode, we'll cover chapters 9 through 12, where Lucy's illness becomes more frightening, Van Helsing enters the story, and the characters begin to realize that ordinary medicine may not be enough. Thanks for listening to Chapter by Chapter Classics. If this episode helped you follow the story, follow the show in your podcast app so you don't miss the next chapter. And if you're enjoying this series, please take a moment to rate the podcast or leave a short review. It really helps other readers and students find the show.